It's like a glimpse into my retirement. Rocking chairs, airports, travel. What's up, guys? Good morning. I'm at PWM, which is Portland, Maine, the jetport, and actually the only jetport I'm aware of. And it makes sense, right? Jetport. It's not a port where air is; it's a port where jets port. But just like how it's not a water yard, it's a shipyard. I think Portland, Maine is onto something. I think they might be the smartest airport in terms of namesake. Anyway, not much going on at 4:15 in the morning. I will say this is one of the few airports that allows flights earlier than 6 a.m. basically due to municipality rules. And Portland, Maine is like, hey, we'll let you out at 5:15 in the morning, which I like because it's not easy to get here and it's a long way from California. I like to leave as soon as possible. So one thing to let you know is that you can definitely get out of here early if you'd like to, especially if you're flying Delta. There's not much going on here, so I want to use this as an opportunity to talk about where to sit in first class. I did get 2 first class upgrades, both on these flights. I'm connected through Detroit, and then I got Detroit to LAX. So throughout this year just started, but I've already been upgraded on 50% of my flights. And that's something I want to maintain traceability on. I want to keep track of that and kind of chart, if you're a Delta Diamond, how often you get upgraded throughout the year. So right now I'm batting 50%. In terms of first class, there's really 3 things you want to remind yourself of and to bear in mind where you want to sit. And there is some science behind it, and you should adapt the science and then apply it to your personal preferences. Number 1 is utility. Number 2 is privacy. And number 3 is food. And those aren't necessarily in any order. The meal is really important, put that first. Privacy is important, put that first. And then if utility is important, put that first. Let's first talk about utility. For utility, basically, I don't like the first row. Because the first row, you can't fit anything in front of a seat in front of you because there is no seat in front of you. So if you'd like to have a backpack in front of you, if you want to store some food in front of you, if you need to stow a laptop, or if you're traveling with an animal, you can't travel with an animal in the first row because that animal usually has to be put underneath your seat, usually. Generally, any baggage has to be stowed underneath the seat in front of you, and if you don't have a seat in front of you, which you don't in the first row, then you have to store stuff up in the overhead compartment, and that means that you have to get up and get it. If you're in an aisle seat, that's okay, but if you're in a window seat, then that becomes problematic. For privacy, I like to sit all the way in the back, and I'll put up my 2 flights right here, and you can see where I like to sit. From Portland to Detroit, it's a smaller flight, so they have a single row on the left-hand side of the plane and then a double row on the right. I always like the single row because you don't have to share the row with anybody else, so it's complete and utter privacy. And then I like to take that a step further, and I like to sit all the way in the back. And that way no one in first class can kind of see what I'm doing. And that's anything, whether that's work, whether I'm doing something personal, sending a photo, texting someone. You can always kind of peer and kind of, take a look at sight lines through the seats in front of you, kind of look at what people are doing. If you want to, it's possible. I know some people have wandering eyes, so I like to kind of negate that by sitting in the very last first class row. And also, to kind of touch on between privacy and functionality, it's coach behind you, and the coach seats are just a little bit more distant than the first class seats. So you kind of lean back all the way and not feel too bad about that. And you're just going to have more room to stretch your legs, so to speak. If you like your first class meals, you're going to really want to listen to this. And this is true for Delta. I can only speak to Delta, but I'm sure other airlines have the same version or a version of this. If you've ever wondered where and why they start asking people what meal they want, there's a science behind it, all right? So on even number flights, actually I'll start with odd number flights because I believe I have an odd number flight first, so check this out. On odd number flights, they are trained, they're supposed to. It is in the flight attendant rule book and handbook. It's supposed to manifest from the back, starting at the back to the front, all right? And the reason they do that is because there's only a certain amount of meals per flight. If you've flown first class, or if you've had this happen to you where they say, they'll come up to me and say, hey, Mr. Williams, I'm sorry, we only have the oatmeal as an option this morning, or we only have the chicken sandwich. They start with 2, but depending on the options from what other people select, by the time they get to you, they could be out of it. If you always want to have first choice for your meal, if that's really important to you, on odd number flights, they start with the back first. So on this one, on my first flight, I'm sitting in row number 4, they're going to start with me. So I'm guaranteed to get my selection for breakfast. Now, on the Detroit to LAX flight, as you can see, they're going to manifest from the start, and it's a large first class cabin. I believe that there are probably 24 people in first class, and they definitely don't have 24 of each meal. By the time they get to me, because I'm going to be very last to select, because it's an even number flight, they start from the front to the back, that I may not get my meal choice. Now, to me, I like my privacy, and I like to be back right or back left at all times, no matter when. Whether it's international flights or domestic flights, I just like to be back right. I like my privacy. I like to have my personal space. I feel the most cozy and comfort in the back row. And I accept the fact that I may not get my meal all the time, and I don't actually eat all the time on first class anyway. But if you are a meal person, odds and evens, remember that. So for Delta, at least for Delta, and you can check this with your other airline and see if it holds true for you. For Delta, odd number flight, they start in the back of first class, and then for even number flights, they start at the front. So remember utility, remember privacy, and also remember your meal. Keep those three things in mind when you're choosing a first class ticket.